This bench may look like a disaster right now. I've got computers stacked on top of computers. I've got cables running in every direction. I've got at least 2 different modem systems and enough beige plastic to lower the property values of the entire neighborhood. But every piece here has a job. Now, I've been putting together an interactive exhibit for VCF Midwest, and it recreates 2 very different ways that people reach the outside world before being online became constant and invisible. On one side, we've got a Windows 98 computer that dials into its own private version of the 1998 web. And on the other, a Commodore 64 calls into a real bulletin board system. And after plenty of testing, troubleshooting, rebuilding, and electronic screeching, the whole thing is finally working. Today, I'm going to show you how it all fits together, why I wanted to build it, and what people will actually do with it at VCF Midwest. Welcome back to the studio. For the past several months, a good portion of my time has gone into building an exhibit I'm calling The Internet Before It Was Silent. Now, the idea came from thinking about how dramatically the act of getting online has changed. Today, nearly everything connects automatically. Phones, computers, televisions, cameras, thermostats, and even refrigerators can stay online without us giving it much thought. There usually is not a clear beginning or ending. You don't sit down and announce that you're about to enter cyberspace. You're already there. But that was not always the case. There was a time when going online was an event. You sat down at the computer. You opened the software. You entered a phone number. You listened as one modem called another. And then, if everything worked, your machine had reached through the telephone network and found another computer somewhere else. There were delays and busy signals, failed calls, and plenty of noise. And that process is what I want this exhibit to bring back, not as something hidden behind a rope, but as something people can sit down and try for themselves. The display is divided into 2 main stations. The first is built around a Windows 98 computer and dial-up internet. The second uses a Commodore 64 and a traditional bulletin board system. Now, these represent 2 different periods of online communication. The Commodore side shows the earlier world of BBSs, when users often dialed directly into one computer running in somebody's home or office. The Windows 98 side represents the later dial-up era, when people connected through an internet service provider and explored the growing World Wide Web. The technology is related, but the feeling is very different, and that contrast is really the heart of the exhibit. So let's start with the Windows 98 side. This is the machine people will use to recreate the feeling of getting online in roughly 1998. Now, to make that work, I needed an operating system from the period, an actual modem link, and a web environment that behaves like something a home user might have encountered at the time. When someone's ready to go online, they start the dial-up networking connection just as they would have in the 90s. The modem goes off hook, it dials the number, the unit at the other end answers, then the 2 machines negotiate. That sound may seem like random electronic screaming today, but it serves a purpose. The modems are determining what speeds and communication methods they both support. They're testing the line, they're agreeing on how data will move between them. And when the noise stops, Windows reports that the computer is online. Now, for anyone who used dial-up, the moment is immediately familiar. For younger people who have never heard it before, it may sound like 2 fax machines arguing over custody of a robot. Now, once that call is established, the browser can open Loudnet. Okay, what is Loudnet? Well, Loudnet is the private web environment that I created for the exhibit. Now, this system is not connected to the modern public internet. That would introduce all kinds of problems. Current websites are far too heavy for an old browser, and they rely on encryption and security standards that these computers don't understand. And frankly, turning strangers loose on today's web through a Windows 98 machine at a public event sounds like the beginning of a really bad video. Now, instead, Loudnet is hosted locally. It contains a controlled collection of period-style pages that can be browsed safely. The sites are intentionally simple. They use basic HTML, small images, straightforward layouts, and the kind of design choices people encountered during the early web. Now, there are bright colors, there are questionable fonts, there may be animated graphics, and there are absolutely no cookie notices asking permission to share your information with 87 different advertising partners before you can read a paragraph. The goal with this is not to copy one particular site, it's to recreate the general feel of web browsing during that period. People can type addresses, follow links, and see what it was like when every image arrived one slow line at a time. Now text, it often appears first, then the pictures gradually filled in from the top. You can sometimes read half the page before the graphics finished loading. That slower pace changed the way people used the web. Now you thought a little harder before clicking because every click meant waiting. The Windows 98 machine needs something to dial into, so that brings us to the server. Now this computer is running Windows Server 2003 and it handles several jobs. It hosts the Loudnet pages, it accepts the incoming call from the client machine, and it provides the network services that are needed to make the setup behave naturally. Now this server essentially acts as a tiny private internet service provider. Instead of reaching a nationwide commercial network, the Windows 98 computer talks directly to this system. Now once the call is answered, the server assigns the client an address and directs its request to the local web service. Now one of the more stubborn parts of the build was name resolution. Now it was easy enough to load the home page by entering the server's numerical network address, but that's not how I wanted people to use it. Typing a row of numbers into a browser does not feel like exploring the web. I wanted somebody to be able to enter loudnet.com and arrive at the home page. Now that meant configuring the old client so it could translate that name into the correct local address. Now it sounds like a small detail, but small details are what make this feel like an actual online session instead of just a technical demonstration. People should be able to sit down, hear the modem, type an address, and start exploring without thinking about what the server is doing behind the scenes. Now, of course, there is one major problem with demonstrating dial-up networking today. Traditional analog telephone lines are disappearing, and many buildings no longer have them at all. And even where telephone service still exists, it might use modern digital systems that don't always cooperate with old modems. So to solve that, the exhibit uses a telephone line simulator. Now this unit creates a small, self-contained phone network between the computers. It provides the line voltage the modems expect. It recognizes dialing, it routes the call, and it allows one modem to reach another without relying on an outside telephone company. Now from the computer's point of view, they are using a normal telephone line. The Windows 98 machine dials, the server modem answers, and the two sides establish a genuine modem session. Now that part mattered to me because I did not want the fake effect with an Ethernet cable and modem noises played through a speaker. The handshake is real. The delay is real. The limited speed is real. When a page takes a few seconds to appear, that's not an animation. That is dial-up doing what dial-up does best, taking its time. The other half of the display goes back even further. Before most people had access to the World Wide Web, many computer users visited bulletin board systems, usually called BBSs. Now, a BBS was typically a computer running special software and connected to one or more telephone lines. A caller would contact that machine directly through a modem. And once logged in, they might read messages or leave posts, download files, play games, or maybe even chat with other users. Unlike today's enormous platforms, a BBS often felt local. The person running it, known as the system operator or sysop, might live in the same town. Now, users might recognize one another by name. Different boards develop their own personalities, rules, inside jokes, and communities. For many people, this was their first taste of social interaction through a computer. The Commodore 64 in this setup reaches a working BBS environment using terminal software and a modem interface. There's no mouse, there are no browser tabs, there are no videos suddenly playing somewhere on the page while you desperately try to find out the button that makes them stop. Now, everything is text-based and keyboard-driven. Yet at the same time, this felt astonishingly advanced. A home computer could communicate with another machine miles away. You could leave a message for someone you had never met. You could download a program without buying a disk or waiting for one to arrive in the mail. That was a major shift in what people believed a personal computer could do. Now, the Commodore has its own route into the server system. The BBS software runs on the server side, while the C64 behaves like a remote caller. Now, the arrangement is kept intentionally close to the way it would have worked historically. The Commodore sends and receives text through its communications hardware. The server answers and presents the board. And from there, the user moves through the menus with simple keyboard commands. Now, the technology is more limited than the Windows 98 web station, but in some ways, the direct nature of it feels a little bit more personal. You're not browsing millions of sites. You're visiting one specific computer. That computer has a name, an operator, and a community built around it. One of the most important decisions that I made was that these machines could not simply sit on a table and look old. Vintage computers are much easier to understand when they're used. A person can look at a Commodore 64 and see that it comes from another era, but when they type a command or hear a modem answer and watch another system respond, the machine suddenly makes sense. The same is true of the Windows station. It's one thing to explain that dial-up was slow. It's another to click a link and watch the page arrive piece by piece. The delay becomes part of the lesson, so does the sound. Even the occasional failed call helps tell the story. Technology demanded more patience then, sometimes a lot more. But because you had to participate in the process, it was also easier to feel that something significant was happening. Making this work once on the bench is one thing, but making it reliable enough for a public event is something else entirely. At home, if something stops working, I can crawl behind the machine, move a cable, restart a service, or spend 20 minutes trying to remember what setting I changed the night before. But at the show, it needs to survive repeated use. People are going to press the wrong keys, they're going to close windows, they may disconnect at exactly the wrong moment, and at least one person will discover a combination of commands nobody has entered since 1997. Now, a lot of the work has kind of gone into making the stations easy to recover. Connections have to be repeatable. Instructions need to be clear. Each computer has to return to a known starting point, and the server has to handle unexpected disconnect. The modem hardware has to remain dependable, and the entire setup must survive transportation, installation, a full weekend of use, and the trip all the way back home. Now, this is where the signs and instructions become just as important as the computers. Somebody should be able to walk up, understand what the station represents, and get started without a 20-minute briefing. Now, I'm going to be there to help, of course, but the display should do as much explaining as possible on its own. This is for people to use and enjoy. Now, it's easy to look back at old online technology and focus on its limitations. The connections were slow, the graphics were basic, the equipment was expensive back then, and using it often required more technical knowledge than people are expected to have today. But those limitations are only part of the story. For the people that were using these systems, the ability to communicate beyond the room was extraordinary. A student with access to a Commodore 64 could reach people outside the school or the neighborhood. A hobbyist could share software with users they had never met. A family with a Windows computer could explore information from around the world without leaving home. These machines help transform personal computers from isolated tools into communication devices. And that shift changed nearly everything that followed. Online communities, social media, streaming, cloud services, remote work, and the modern web, they all grew from the basic idea that computers became far more powerful when they can talk to one another. Now, technology has improved tremendously since then, but something changed along the way. Going online once felt like going somewhere. You connected, you visited, and when you were finished, you disconnected and returned to the rest of your day. That link now rarely ends. That's why it's called, the internet before it was silent. The old internet announced itself. It rang, it clicked, it dialed, it hissed and squealed. And when the sound finally stopped, you knew you had arrived. Now, if you're going to be at VCF Midwest this year, I hope you'll stop by and try it all for yourself. You can dial into Loudnet from the Windows 98 machine, explore the BBS from the Commodore, and hear enough modem noise to make everyone within 50 feet either smile or develop a nervous twitch. Now, I've also recently picked up several other machines that are going to appear in future episodes. That includes 3 Commodore 64 bread bins, one of which came from a local school corporation and has a Revision A board. Now, I also picked up a generic beige box PC that still boots into Windows, along with a compact portable that deserves a full episode of its own. Those are all coming soon. But for now, the priority has been getting this entire display packed up and ready to be transported and ready for everybody. Now, this project has involved computers from different eras, modems, telephone hardware, but seeing all of it finally work together has made all of the effort worthwhile. So let me know in the comments which part of the exhibit you'd like to see explored in more detail. Would you like a deeper look at the server, the network setup, a complete tour of Loudnet, a closer look at the Commodore BBS, or should we just move directly into that school surplus Revision A Commodore 64? Now, if you enjoy projects like this and want to help support the channel, you can join Studio Access or After Hours using the Join button below. Members like you help make larger projects and public displays like this possible, and they also get access to additional videos, extended cuts, and behind-the-scenes updates from the studio. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see some of you at VCF Midwest. Happy vintage computing!